Living a life in full is a conversation you always wanted to have with that person who gave an amazing TED Talk, or the author of one of your favorite books, or that inspirational Olympian you always wanted to know more about. It's graduate-level conversations with those making a difference in the world and in the lives of others. This show brings you new ideas and approaches so that you can live a life in full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout, and I hope you enjoy this episode. This episode is sponsored by our new video course, How to Publish in the New Millennium, from scientific journals to bestsellers. It's an asynchronous course offering, so you can watch it when it's convenient for your schedule. It's based on 8 video lessons and provides 3 hours of material with new concepts, stories, and examples, and it includes several attempts at humor. You'll learn about the best ways to submit a manuscript to a peer-reviewed journal, the mechanics of book contracting, what publishers are looking for, how to evaluate and negotiate a contract, royalties, advances, copyright, and ownership, why to never first submit a manuscript to a publisher, when you need an agent and when you don't, and the differences between publishers. You'll learn about ebooks, print on demand, Amazon's CreateSpace and KDP programs, and other non-traditional approaches to publishing, along with how to tell if a platform is of high quality or not. We do a deep dive into marketing, how to create media kits and what goes into them, along with examples, how to create a great Amazon author page, how book signings work and how to be invited to do library talks, and the economics of both, along with developing speaking engagements, promotional tours, and being a podcast guest, as well as a number of other publicity aspects. We cover blogging and provide additional resources to help you in crafting your work and making it better. This is a rich, fun, and fact-filled course that covers everything you need to know from a practical and actionable perspective. It's for anyone wanting to get their written work into the world, be it academia, popular media, or both. Join the masterclass in getting published. To learn more, please visit tinyurl.com/gettingpublishedcourse. Thanks. Welcome to another episode of Living a Life in Full. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Stout. In a world with a surplus of ideas, what separates a good idea from a bad one? How can we learn to cultivate a mindset that produces the kind of ideas people can't turn down? Many can't generate solid ideas. They may come up with tired or reused ones, or they may generate lots of ideas, but none that really have traction. A great idea presents as a well-formulated thought or plan of action that spurs growth, change, advancement, adaptation, or new insight. Worthwhile ideas move the needle. They can change the playing field altogether. One of the most innovative thinkers in this area is Professor Robin Landa, author of The New Art of Ideas, Unlock Your Creative Potential, which is designed to help readers consistently produce worthwhile ideas by becoming nimble and imaginative thinkers. Robin holds the title of Distinguished Professor at the Michael Graves College at Kean University. She's written 25 books about creativity, graphic design, advertising design, branding, and drawing, and they include Strategic Creativity, a business field guide to advertising, branding, and design, which is a #1 ranked new release in 2 different categories on Amazon, which is really pretty cool. Nimble, Thinking Creatively in the Digital Age, Graphic Design Solutions, Designing Brand Experiences, and Advertising by Design, just to name a few. She's won numerous awards for her writing, research, teaching, design, and humanitarian work. Robin is a former chair of the governance board of Design Incubation, a design research and practice organization, and serves as a creative consultant to the C-suites of various international corporations. Named one of the great teachers of our time by the Carnegie Foundation, she has taught university students as well as industry professionals how to generate worthwhile ideas. It's no surprise people consider Robin as a creativity authority, but she's more than that, as she uses her creative powers for good, not evil. With a strong moral compass, she asks students and the faculty she mentors, as well as many Fortune 500 clients she advises, how does your goal benefit individuals, society, or our planet? How can your idea make life better? Robin champions her students, advocates for industry inclusion and equity, and provides university scholarships for meritorious students and students in need. Like many creatives, Robin produces ideas in various forms: writing, design, advertising, fine art, screenwriting, and of course, her pedagogy. This has resulted in awards from the National Society of Arts and Letters, the Art Directors Club of New Jersey, Graphic Design USA, and the National League of American Pen Women. She was named Kean University Teacher of the Year in 2013 and has received several Kean Presidential Excellence Awards for her research. In the humanitarian space, she received the 2015 Human Rights Educator Award, and her student design team has won humanitarian awards as well. Robin has juried design and advertising competitions, and the Crack the Spine Literary Journal has published several of her short stories, one of which was nominated for Best of the Net. She's lectured at Columbia University and has another book titled Shareworthy: Storytelling for Advertising, to be published by Columbia University Press. Hey, Robin, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for such a generous introduction, Chris. I'm honored to be with you. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Oh, well, thank you. I think you are just, kind of the poster person for Renaissance woman, Renaissance person. So I'm anxious to kind of get a little bit below the surface and learn more about all this. So there are just so many things I want to talk to you about, but maybe a good starting place is, could you maybe kick us off with like this non-linear path to design and creativity and also academia?
Sure. My interests are so varied. I really respect people like yourself who are polymaths, and so I really always think about how to connect different fields so that we can really boost our creative thinking by cross-thinking. It's a kind of interesting way. Like if I read something about history or I go to the opera, I always think, how does this relate back to my field?
Mm. And it's so, in doing your background, it is so diverse from the areas, because this is like was it doing fashion design for your Barbies? Let's even go back to that era. Tell us about that, and then bring us up to date.
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, when I was little, I really wanted to be a fashion designer and a dancer. I mean, we all have 3 or 4 things that we want to be.
Right.
But I would cut up, my poor mother, I would cut up some of her necklaces and clothes and my clothes to make design fashions for my Barbie doll. and I would draw fashions also. And my paternal grandfather was in the dress manufacturing business, and so he knew many design illustrators, fashion designers. And when he came over, my mother showed my illustrations to him, and he said, well, she must have copied them. And my mother said, no, she didn't copy them. She invents them. And so that was kind of my start in design, although I didn't follow the fashion track.
Gotcha. So, and then you also, did you lean more into just the fine arts and in art and drawing?
Yes, actually, one of my masters is in painting, and I really wanted to be a painter. And then I have another master's in art history. And then after all of that, I went back to take undergraduate courses in advertising, art direction, and in graphic design, and switched careers.
And I would imagine the bit that I know about you, that all of those kinds of what some people might see as diverse activities are really sort of additive, if not formative, to what you bring to the classroom now and to your writing.
Oh, I love the way you said that. Absolutely. I really think that by having that background, the art history really taught me how, a graduate degree in art history really taught me how to do research, how to conduct research that, in a way, but as you know, from a doctoral program that you don't get in undergraduate school. And then the fine art program really taught me like a great background in fundamentals of thinking about visual communication and really having great breadth in terms of artists from all centuries. And so I bring that to visual communication, and I don't think that the standard Bachelor of Fine Arts program in graphic design or advertising has that kind of breadth.
Yeah, I would say not. So that I think is one of your maybe your superpowers. So, well, maybe we can start to construct this as a conversation with using your latest book. I know you've got like a bunch going on, but I just kind of want to make our focus today on this conversation, the new art of ideas. But I have to tee this up, as is my habit, to say a little bit more about what some others have said about it. So, Dr. Gregory Turner Rahman at the University of Idaho said, Robin Landa rewrites old notions and assumed truths about ideation. Through sharp observations and top-tier examples from real-world case studies, the book excellently prepares the reader to generate worthwhile ideas that harness diversity and encourage cultural, environmental, and creative stewardship. Furthermore, Dr. Tricia M. Farwell, associate professor at the School of Journalism at Middle Tennessee State University, said, the art of new ideas helps readers see beyond asking questions when developing ideas to push them to think strategically by focusing on what she calls the 3 Gs. This blending of creative aspects with strategic thinking encourages those following her guidance to come up with ideas that are not simply new, but that are high-value concepts worth pursuing. This book is ideal for anyone from student to experienced professional who wants to take their intellectual curiosity to the next level. And David Baldwin, there's many more, but these are my highlight reels for you, Robin. David Baldwin, the author of The Belief Economy, said, there are many books trying to formalize idea generation, but few offer such a simple formula as the 3 Gs, which helps you quickly create and evaluate an idea and point it into a new and powerful direction. This book does something few do. It provides an actionable way to move forward and create worthwhile ideas that will meet a need in the marketplace. And those are well-earned accolades, Robin, and I have to agree. I really enjoyed your book. How did this one come about? What spurred it?
I have students, I have to teach my university students to generate ideas. And when they go out into the industry, into the profession of becoming art directors or copywriters or graphic designers or brand designers, they have to generate many ideas daily. And it's not just one idea for a year. They have to work with a team and generate ideas. And I noticed that they had frustrations with the existing idea generation models. And so I created my own, and I was been doing it for a long time. And one student came back after she had secured an internship at a very prestigious New York City agency, and she was there for a week, and she came back and she was very excited, and she said, Robin, I have to tell you that I'm on a creative team, and they asked us to solve this advertising problem. And I said, well, I have this idea, and I have that idea, and I have this other idea. And she said the creative director loved all of my ideas, and the other interns were just sitting there. And I thought, well, I guess it's time to codify this and share it.
Wow.
And then another student who didn't have me as a professor had gotten a job, and they had asked her to generate an idea, and she messaged me and said, how do I do that?
Real quick. Yeah. Hey, Robin.
Yeah, exactly. Real quick. And I thought, okay, Chris, you're exactly right. I said, okay, how do I teach this to her really quick through Facebook Messenger? And that's how I did it. And then I approached this publisher, Barrett Kohler, and I met with Steve Piersante, who's the founder of Barrett Kohler and a senior editor. And he said, well, we already have a book on how to get ideas, and it does very well. Why should I publish yours? And I said, well, let me tell you.
Make yourself comfortable. Here we go.
Make yourself comfortable. It's a new method. And there hasn't really been a new method that's easy to use since 1953.
Oh my gosh. Was that brainstorming? Is that? Yeah.
Yes. Very
Golly.
good.
Oh my gosh. 1953. Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah.
In the world of creatives, no one was creative about being creative.
Well, it's a really hard thing to offer a system for. I mean, there's question storming. People have written about that, and that's great. But it doesn't actually explain how to form the idea. and then other people have other little hints, but there's really no forming of the idea in any of these systems. And that's what I was really interested in, because that's what my students needed.
That's so great. I want to get back into the creative side of things, but I nerd out on the like the construction of books and stuff. I'll probably weave this back in the here and there. But I was also kind of impressed. I mean, you kind of walk the talk. If people haven't had a chance to see your book or do a look inside on Amazon or anything, but the book itself is really beautifully designed. And as I read, the actor Holly Taylor, who's like on Manifest and The Americans and a number of other things, did the illustrations. And in reading in the afterward, it was sort of like, I think a bucket list kind of thing for her. And the result was beautiful and actually quite powerful. How did you two get together and start that collaboration?
Oh, thank you for asking about that, because I just love the work that she created.
Yeah, yeah.
Holly was my student in the
No kidding. Okay.
excuse me, at Kean University. She's as you said, a working actor, and when she applied to Kean, she was on the Americans, and she needed a university who would be flexible about her schedule, because
Wow.
she has to be on set or on location, and our associate dean Rose Ganella said, "Sure, we'll be flexible. Come on in."
Wow.
Excuse me. And Holly was my student in a couple of courses, and I mentored her. And she talk about polymaths. She was on Broadway in Billy Elliot as a child. She's a ballet dancer. She's a painter. She's an illustrator. She's a designer. She's an art director. And of course, she's on Manifest, which broke at #1 on Netflix.
Wow.
And she was with me yesterday for our book launch at the university.
Oh, wonderful.
And people I mean, like, I was in the corner, I don't blame them. She's this gorgeous, young, vibrant celebrity.
Wow. Well, how fortunate for her to have you as a professor and mentor and now collaborator. I mean, the synergy between that is just touching. I had an opportunity a long time ago to work on a book set with Prager, and you and I will share some more stories about a shared publisher, Wiley, maybe later on. But it's like you get the contract and everything's roses and butterflies, and then I sort of had this panic attack of going, oh my gosh, I cannot deliver by the deadline. It was an edited work. I did a couple of chapters, authored them myself, but most of it was edited work with contributors. And I was like, I can't, a month out, I knew that I was just going to, trip out of the gates and not be able to make do on my contract. So I went to one of the schools where I was adjunct and was able to recruit 4 graduate students that were able to help, write the chapters, put things together. They got authorships if they were the sole author, co-authorships if they co-authored, and before they even graduated, they had publications on their CV that they could do, and it was just wonderful for me because it was such a benefit that they were really cool folks. They were really into it. It was a project where they got to interview people that were sort of there, on their all-star list, founders of like Doctors Without Borders and Amnesty International is a book on humanitarian intervention. And it was wonderful for all of us. And the proverbial, high tides raise all ships. We were able to hit our deadline, make our publisher happy. Hopefully readers like the book. I think the people that got interviewed by graduate students, were kind of enjoyed that probably more than the ones that I interviewed, so it's a wonderful collaboration. It's a wonderful kind of meta model to be able to do that with students. So I totally get that.
Well, that was very generous of you. What a great opportunity for them.
It was mutually fun, and I think I got the better end of the deal. So back to this whole aspect of the process of effective ideation and getting spontaneous texts from students in the moment and whatnot. But the book really kind of helps readers unlock creative potentials and give some tools for that. And maybe the fundamental tool in that toolkit is this conceptualization of the 3 Gs of every good idea. Could you maybe just, for listeners that haven't had a chance to pick up the book yet, could you maybe step through what those Gs, what they by name, and then kind of what they compose, what makes them up?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. The first G is a goal. So that's pretty easy. It's really what you want to achieve. And a lot of people think that a goal is an idea, but it's not.
Hmm.
It's just what you want to achieve. There's a gap. And the gap I find really fascinating. And I learned about finding a gap, and I'm sure you know this really well, through doing literature searches. When academics or researchers are looking through what exists, what literature, what research exists, we're often looking to see what void we can fill, right? How
Mm-hmm.
can we move the discipline forward? And in advertising and in branding, a gap is what is your competitor not doing that you can do? How can you differentiate yourself? So those two aspects of different disciplines or processes really made me realize how important it is to find a gap. So, example, is there a missing piece in research? Is there a missing product or a missing service? Is there a crack in the research? Is there an area that's not been explored? For example, think about the fact that we send things into space, but can we transport cargo back and forth to outer space? Well, somebody has started to do that. That was a gap. Is there
Mm-hmm.
an underserved audience or an unconsidered group of people? Is there a lack of understanding about how something works? A method that should be tested or retested? A new method of delivery. So think about messenger RNA is a new medicine, a new class of drugs.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a new operating system? Is there, oh my goodness, sorry.
You're a popular person. No worries.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
Uh, is there a more sustainable method, a toxic-free method? And very importantly, is there a way to address the world's chronic crises like
Mm.
hunger, poverty, clean water for all, human trafficking, and so on? And then there's a gain, and that one's pretty easy. That's what's the benefit? What's in it for individuals, society, creatures, or our planet? Because I really think that if it's just frivolous, it's not good. We really need to think about what we can do to benefit humanity.
I really respect that. And that, kind of in your intro about using these powers for good and not evil. And it seems like, obviously my point of view, my lens tends to be towards the humanitarian kinds of things. And even just as you step through those, it makes me see how those can kinds of fit on, different projects and whatnot. And, there's always going to be a linearity of saying these, but by design, you say in the book that a person using your tools could use those G's in any order. There's no orthodoxy or canon that says they have to be always goal gap gain, but they can be gain gap goal. They can be gap goal gain. So could you maybe talk about that and maybe toss out a couple of examples how we could use them in different directions?
Sure. So you're exactly right. It's a fluid process. If you notice a gap, you can start there. Or if you notice a gain. So for example, Sal Khan was a hedge fund manager in Boston at a financial firm. When his family called and said that his tween niece, Nadia, wanted to get onto the advanced math track in her middle school. And when he please tutor her. And of course, being the very nice man that he is, he said sure. And he created these little videos for her to advance in math, and she did. And then more relatives called. And then friends of those relatives called,
Oh.
and Khan saw the gain.
Mm-hmm.
He saw that this really helps having videos to go back to so that you can level up or redo something. And he then realized that there's a gap, that unless you have money, you really can't get tutoring after school.
Mm-hmm.
Wealthy children can get tutoring.
Right.
It's very expensive per hour. I mean, I don't think people realize that tutors can cost anywhere from $95 to $200 an hour, which is out of the zone for most working families.
Right.
And so he left his hedge fund job and he created Khan Academy, which I think is one of the great organizations of our time where students can get free tutoring in almost any subject. And now he's even pushed it further to where you can get live tutoring and it's all free. So
That's
he saw the gain.
yeah, that's wonderful. That is wonderful. So you, well, actually, I've interrupted my own question. So, do you want to give us a couple of other examples, maybe how those have gone in the G's in a different order?
Sure, thank you. Kat Nori was in her kitchen making lunch for her children, and three children, and she was using the single disposable plastic sandwich bags. And she thought, this is really wasteful. Um, and she realized that there was a gap in the industry, that there is no, or at that point, there was no reusable sandwich bag. And she created Stasher, which you can use reuse that sandwich bag about 1,000 times, a silicone sandwich bag. And it was so successful that Johnson bought it from her. So she started with a gap. And a lot of people start with a gap, which is a pain point, right? Like what is something, so if you think of OXO, the product design company, the owner noticed that his wife, who has arthritis, had trouble using certain existing things like a can opener or a broom.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a pain point. So he thought, how do I fix this? How do I create a line of product design that is better for people, easier to use when you have limited mobility or difficulty? And and everybody loves that product.
Yeah. Does that have overlap? I know you're at the Michael Graves College of Design. Didn't I have a undergrad degree in architecture, and so I know of him from that side of things. But he also did a lot of design, and then he did a lot of accessible design. Am I remembering that correctly, or do I have
Yes,
that wrong?
yes, he did. Michael did everything. He did product design and architecture and furniture design. And then towards the end of his life, when he was wheelchair bound, he started to think about accessibility. And I think it was in a hospital that he was in, he noticed how difficult it was if you were sitting in a chair and with limited mobility, and noticed so many different things and started really rethinking his processes. Just an extraordinary man and architect. We miss him so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you, with these examples, like, how did you come across them? I mean, I can kind of get maybe the OXO with Michael Graves, and maybe there's a little overlap in that Venn diagram. But you've got you've got True Name, you've got Fleming and penicillin, you got royalty exchange, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that they are so illustrative of kind of the points that you make. But how does someone go about? Is it through the literature reviewing process, or how did you come up with those wonderful stories?
Exactly right, Chris.
Okay, good. All right. Well, it's nice to have a theory that gets verified every so often. So,
Exactly right. I mean, of course, I had favorites. Like
uh,
when I wrote about Sal Khan, had to include him. He's one of
sure.
my heroes, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, one of my heroes. And I don't think most people know about Matt Height, who and Ken Jones. Do you mind if I
Please, no,
talk?
absolutely, yeah. Educate us.
Matt Height is a Microsoft software engineer, and he was scrolling through Twitter and he saw a photograph of an adaptive controller, a gaming controller that had been hacked or bespokely designed by Ken Jones, who runs the organization Warfighter Engaged, and it's an organization for severely wounded veterans. And Ken Jones creates an adaptive game controller for each veteran individually. So they're bespoke, and it takes a long time. And Matt Height reached out to him to find out about it, and then thought he wanted to do something about this too. So he went back to Microsoft, and they have a yearly summit where they investigate accessibility. And he put together a team to think about redesigning a gaming controller for people with limited mobility and extremely limited mobility. And it took years, and it took a lot of dedicated people at Microsoft, but Microsoft was the first big company to mass produce an adaptive controller. And would you believe that in the US alone, there are 46 million gamers with limited mobility?
Wow. Wow. I love that. It's so, and again, it kind of speaks to that humanitarian thread aspect too of, because I could just see, I have this negative stereotype of, someone in a boardroom and, back in the 50s with smoke filled or whatever going, what's the market for this? And, it's not significant enough or whatever. But to do that in that kind of a way and to see that, again, people are attempting to solve their own problems. But then when you can do a collaboration like what we've been talking about, it just really accelerates it and is a very additive creative process in and of itself.
And unfortunately, there are still a lot of those people that you
Is
just
are they okay? You'd have better visibility. That's okay.
well, they're wonderful people like Sal Khan and Matt Haidt and Lin-Manuel Miranda, but there are people who are only interested in profit.
Mm,
And like you, for me, that's not my jam.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, it has to be a triple bottom line, and the triple bottom line starts with profit, but I kind of reverse that and I put people, planet, profit. So, I mean, in people and planet, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. So one of the G's that I want to focus maybe double click on gaps. You in the book talk about, maybe you can share with the audience now about how designers and leaders can think of gaps and what are ways to find a gap. I mean, some like what we've just been talking about is like the gap finds you. The Khan Academy, that there was a need that came. He wasn't sitting around in his hedge fund thinking, oh, I should do educational videos or something. He didn't even go out to research it. It came to him. But is it a two-way street? Is it one of those things where you just sort of necessity's the mother of invention, or is there a process? Could you step us through a process of how to locate gaps if we're trying to come up with a creative idea?
Sure, thanks for asking. I think if let's say you're a manufacturer, a gap, one way to easily think about gaps, is there a more sustainable method of manufacturing, or is there a toxic-free method, or is there a way to give back to the earth rather than pollute the earth? For example, there's a new paper pill bottle. So I think a lot of people don't realize that the little plastic pill bottles that prescription medicine comes in are thrown away. They're too small to recycle, and so they just become toxic landfill. And somebody at Saatchi and Saatchi Wellness thought about that and thought, what's the life cycle of this little bottle? And he approached a package design manufacturer in Israel named Tom, and together they came up with not only a toxic-free, 100% toxic-free paper bottle, but you can compost it. And so not only does it not pollute the earth, it gets back to the earth. So, I mean, there's so many ways to look at it. Or if you think about, we're serving X audience, is anybody underserved? So for example, we'll go back to gaming. There are a couple of audiences, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, of audiences who are not served. For example, tween girls, there's a dearth of games. I mean, they're almost all aimed at boys. They're like babysitting games or dog care games, pet care games, but they're really kind of ignored because manufacturers assume they're not gamers, but they are gamers. Mm-hmm. And then seniors. Gaming could be very beneficial for seniors, and we have boomers starting to, are heading into we're already in the senior area. Mm-hmm. So if you understand who you can serve or who's unconsidered, and then of course gaps are always in thinking about how different people can be served and how an idea can be amplified by getting diverse points of view, by being inclusive. If you have somebody who's living with disability on your team, or if you have different people of color on your team, or, I really believe in being inclusive and having diverse points of view and getting multiple perspectives. And that can point out so many gaps.
That's great. You write in the book specifically that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the X factor in design. Could you give us some examples of that?
Sure. If you think about, I mean, when I was working full time at ad agencies, often I'd be the only woman in the room, and they'd turn to me and say, "What do you think? You're a woman." And I'm like,
You're the
"Yeah,
spokeswoman of XY chromosomes. So.
yeah, exactly." And that just points to the fact that there aren't enough different people sitting around a table coming up
Mhm.
with ideas. And so if you propose a gap to one audience, another audience might see it very differently. And often in companies, there's a kind of group think. Everybody's coming from the same point of view or the same region or the same gender. And groupthink isn't, you know that.
Sure.
Yeah, in your field is not good at all. So to get multiple perspectives, you can start to see a goal, a gap, or a gain in a very new way.
We used to, I've been involved in a number of startups, and one of the things when we could kind of design it in at the early stages, we had a rotating individual so that they wouldn't kind of get, blacklisted or anything, that was like the doubting Thomas or the devil's advocate, or we had, cute little names for them, cliche kinds of names, where the person's total job was kind of like, I really love this in your book, of how could we make this worse? Or where do you have it wrong? Or how is this dumb? Or whatever. We were very polite with each other and stuff. But I find that a very creative thing. And it just tickled me with the how can we make it worse? I mean, there's so many daily experiences where we, each of us have our war stories of bad design. I have a friend who is a designer and artist, and he works for a bank. And I thought, oh, you design, their logo? Like, what do you do? And he said, no, I design their processes. Like, when they're online, is it just torture for them to, deposit a check or to check a balance or to do a this or do a that? And it really opened me up. And I think that's probably, conversations with him are a good, primer for, learning more about you and your book and how your work gets applied. But it really, it almost, it'd be fun to have a companion thing on your website or something of here, people write in, here's some examples of bad design experiences. So
That's a good idea. Thank you.
sure. I just thought it just so resonated with me, Robin. I thought, oh my gosh, let me tell you a story. So,
Oh, yeah. I mean, and even if you think about service, like how can we make pizza delivery worse? How can
hmm
we make food delivery worse? And if you think about that and you go over that, then you know what to do well.
yeah, yeah. Oh, point well taken. So yeah, absolutely. So one of the, back to the nerdy mechanics of authorship and writing and book construction, I'm a big fan of checklists and resources and discussion guides. So maybe I want to kind of drill around and bounce around in some of those. Could you discuss the 8 ways that you can set a goal, what that's all about?
Sure. I think that you can think about obviously noticing a gap, so you move from that. You can challenge the status quo. That's a really important way to think about a goal. So, what's the conventional thinking? I'll go back to messenger RNA that Dr. Carrico and Dr. Weissman had been investigating. They went up against the conventional star chamber. People really didn't think that that was a good path. And boy, oh boy, am I glad they
Yeah, yeah.
so challenging the status quo is always interesting, going against prevailing conventions. For most people, I think they follow a passion. This is something, if I were thinking about my own passion, I would still want to design the perfect black dress. We do something that's our
Mm-hmm.
goal, that things that we're passionate about, whether, in our own discipline, or you move from your own discipline. What is your expertise? So I think his last name is Shawarma. He also was in financial industry, and he noticed that people can't really deal with their 501ks. How do they roll it over? How do they take care of it? So it was like a really simple business that he created called Capitalize, where he helps you with your 501. So it came out of his own discipline, right, out of his own expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we need to allow a goal to take shape. The first idea might not be it, and you keep thinking about it and look for the gap, look for the gain in it. And you have to be open to serendipity, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like something that you stumble across, an observation, a curiosity. Velcro was based on an observation. Uh, he was walking in the woods with his dog, and he noticed that burrs were sticking to both his clothing and the dog, and he investigated, and then we've got Velcro. Uh,
I
yeah,
love that.
yeah, oh no, it's great. And I really think you need to push past your first goal sometimes, because if as an instructor, when you ask students something, I would say that half the class come up with the same response. It's usually the most typical
Mm-hmm.
response or the most conventional response. So you often want to push past that and push better or improvise.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's so many ways, or seeing a connection, right? Lin-Manuel Miranda goes on vacation, picks up the biography of Alexander Hamilton, and he's thinking, oh, it would be really interesting to write this history of the founding fathers in hip hop verse.
Yeah. I love that story. I mean, I loved Hamilton. I've seen it like once live and probably five times, on video. But I never knew that story. And it was just like, oh, talk about creative, like the two most non-fitting together kinds of things in the world, and to do it so artistically and beautifully. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Oh, yes. And I mean, that's a case for being a curious person,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he had just finished In the Heights off Broadway with a very successful run. It was about to come to Broadway, and he was going to take a rest. And you'd think he'd pick up a beach read, or you think he'd pick up a book about, promoting musical theater,
Right.
something. And he picks up a biography of Alexander Hamilton. And but it's because, well, he credits his father, who's a politician, for his interest in history, but he's still interested, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a very curious mind. And if he hadn't been curious, I don't think we'd have Hamilton.
Yeah, it's just certainly a non-obvious kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, and speaking of kind of cool stories like that, could you share the one about Instagram's origin between combining bourbon and photography fandom?
Oh, sure. And I'm forgetting his name at the
I
moment.
can't think of it either. I just remembered the bourbon. So,
I apologize to him. Yes, he was a fan of bourbon, and before that, he was a fan of photography. So when he went to study abroad in Italy, he brought his, very good camera with him. And the instructor who was new to him, who he had in Italy, often when you go study abroad, you get a whole new set of instructors there, said, well, that's a pretty posh camera. Why don't you try this camera? And it was a Japanese camera that took kind of distressed images in square formats. And he used it and he loved it. And so when he came back, he first started a software company, and they figured out an app about location, about checking in, and photography and the imagery was either secondary or tertiary on their minds, and which he called bourbon, so because he loved bourbon.
okay.
And then it wasn't that this enterprise that he and his partner were creating wasn't that successful, but they did notice that people were most interested in sharing the images that they would take on their phones. And that's how he came to Instagram. And the reason that the imagery is square on Instagram is because of this camera, which I'm forgetting the name of, that he used
Yeah. Well, and their logo even, I think, originally sort of looked like probably like what that little Japanese camera was. It reminds me of like the old Kodak brownies or something. There were just these little boxes. So
good notice. Huh?
I'm a nerd. I told you.
Well,
So,
that's a good eye. You
well,
have a good eye.
and it's like, Reid Hoffman also talks about, the pivot. And you and I were talking off mic before we hit record about, like, I have this nonprofit, and we had to do that as well too. I don't know if it was a result of creativity. I'd like to think so from what now is the result, but we're an all volunteer organization, all have day jobs, etc. And we got to this one point where we were going to collaborate on a project with this other entity, NGO, that was going to go for a USAID grant. And it was a 3-year grant. And part of the requirements was to go to a very difficult place to get to on the opposite side of the world 4 times a year for a period of time of probably 10 days to 2 weeks. And the nature of what that research would be is observational kinds of things in a clinical setting. And I was kind of the guy that was going to be doing that because we have a diverse board, and I was the psychologist. So I thought, oh my gosh, I can't go. Good news, bad news. Like, if we got the grant, that's great news. And I get to tell my family, hey, for the next 4 years, I'm not going on any vacations with you because I'm going to have to suck up all my vacation time to go to this place and do this research. And the grant didn't get funded. So we kind of, in a sad, ironic way, got off the hook for that. But it caused us to realize that, we are not infinitely scalable with the kind of work. At that point, we were doing 6 projects literally all over the world, South America to Asia and kind of everywhere else in between. And those weren't projects that required a lot of us. It was our partners in country. It didn't require us to be there or anything, just to provide tools and consultation and whatever, periodically being there, but not consistently being there. And our pivot was to do exactly that. And I thought about this in the context of your 3 Gs, because the ultimate fundamental part of what our center does is that, it shouldn't be so hard to do good in the world. It shouldn't be so hard to get involved in humanitarian kinds of work, can we reduce that friction? And we kind of, little tongue-in-cheek, refer to it as open sourcing humanitarian intervention. And it was exactly the model as I thought about what I do with the nonprofit and what we did even with this pivot was to exactly, it just perfectly fit within your 3 Gs. So it's sort of like, good, that's kind of validating, like this is very good. So I want to shift gears to kind of put on my little psychology hat, because it really caught my eye, your chapter 7, in which you talk about emotional obstacles. And you provide a wonderful separate resource for how to overcome those emotional obstacles in one of your wonderful checklists. Could you maybe just give an overview of what that covers and maybe a couple of examples?
Sure, thank you. I think a lot of people don't move forward with projects or goals because, well, one, fear of failure, which is very, very common, as you know.
Yep.
But there are other things that you can deal with more easily that are less psychologically based. So, for example, if you have family members who depend on you, is there a way to get others to help you so that you can manage your time a little better or have some time? Is there a way that you can maximize your energy? Make sure you get enough sleep so that you have the energy to pursue what you want to do. And staying positive, like really staying positive about the whole thing. Sorry about the noise. I live in New York City.
No problem.
A fire or something going on.
Yikes.
I'm really sorry.
No problem. No worries. Hopefully it's not your building, Robin. If it is, let us know.
It was once.
Oh gosh, I'm very careful what I kid about.
Yeah. You're walking down the street and you see broken glass and you think, oh my goodness, there's a fire. And when you come back, you have no door.
Oh no, I'll have to have you back on a round 2 and talk about that. So,
Yeah.
Good Lord.
I think it's important to notice what's interfering with what you want to pursue. And I think people don't take the time to address that.
Yeah.
Or what about the situation do you find challenging that you might be able to deal with? So getting a meal done in the morning and having it frozen and then you can defrost it for dinner, like just managing your time in a different way. Or is there one action that you can take that can mitigate the situation in order to move the idea forward? So, there's so many things, so many obstacles that, people want our time. Some people have 2 jobs, they have children, they have elderly parents. There's so much.
Yeah.
I think for me, I've made writing or whatever I want to do often a non-negotiable,
Mm.
or exercise for me is a non-negotiable. I
Mm-hmm.
do it. If I
Mm-hmm.
headache or I have, if I have the sniffles, I won't go to a gym, but I'll exercise at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's like brushing your teeth or taking a shower. You don't argue with yourself.
Right.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And that's how I've managed. And not, I mean, I have my own dragons to slay. I don't say no to the extra cookie, but I do manage my time for my work. And I think, you have to, every person has to look at their life and see what's interfering with what they want to do.
Yeah. That's good advice. I mean, it also kind of in that context of the stuff, there's always going to be stuff that can get away. I like how you phrased it, slaying your own dragons. There's always going to be these certain kinds of things, but if you can, as best a person can in their circumstance, structure things, and like you said, making writing a priority as best that those kinds of things can happen, can make all the difference. So, um, with that in mind, and with the book writing and the little our conversation with overlapping Venn diagram dots and spots, you're donating all the royalties from the pre-orders of the Art of New Ideas and Strategic Creativity to humanitarian efforts in Ukraine. Do I have my facts straight on that? Is that right?
Yes.
Wonderful.
And some to humanitarian relief in Puerto Rico and Florida, wherever the hurricanes hit.
Wow.
I extended that.
Good for you.
And then after, when both books are out now, I donate a good part of my royalties to student scholarships.
I love that. I mean, you have I think a merit one as well as a student need one, and that's, I mean, it's so wonderful to see professors endowing those kinds of things. I love that. So, what's the itch that humanitarian bent, scratches for you?
Well, my daughter went to college. She didn't have to have a job while going to college. My students work. My students hold one job or two jobs, even though we're a public university and we're very reasonably priced. It's still a hardship for
Yeah.
many people, and it breaks my heart to see that people are working so hard to pay off college debt. As we know, President
Hmm.
Biden addressed that. So it comes from really trying to help and being in that room with these wonderfully talented people who could just use a little bit of an extra boost.
Yeah, good for you. Yeah, I was first person in my family to go to college. My paternal grandparents didn't complete high school, and the education was always sort of an important aspect. My folks were divorced, and long story for another day. But they both thought education was good, even though they did not have opportunities to do college for themselves. And I was fortunate with Pell Grants and with scholarships and just and part-time jobs throughout undergrad, and I've tried to do the same thing back with my undergrad alma mater to be able to do that and to do some guest lecturing and mentoring. That really speaks to me, Robin. I think it is such a, and you get to see it day in, day out. I mean, it's for me, it's sort of just memories and remembering what it was like a million years ago. But I really tip my hat to you to do that, because it makes all the difference in the world of not just being able to go to school, but to get out of school and to to the bona fides to say, hey, I've gotten this scholarship based upon my academic performance, and that cascades into helping get that job, and it pays rewards, and gives interest. It compounds that interest for years on. So that's really impressive. I hope other people in those kinds of positions can have that kind of inspiration from hearing what you've done. So I got to shift back into my writing nerdiness now, if you don't mind. It's probably, you're going to get a whiplash after this conversation, but you and I share publishers with Wiley. You've got a variety of other publishers that I don't have experience with, but the One of the things that I found with Wiley was that they liked in my area, because I'm like more psych and healthcare and medicine and whatnot, and they were just hell bent on series books, and to a degree, still so today. And I've had a couple of series books that I started, and a couple of series books that I got to be co-author on and stuff. One of the things I want to find out about you, you've done a number of like updated editions in my research on you. Like I know some like you're up to the sixth edition and things like that. Can you maybe unpack for the writers, myself and the writers in the audience, that how does that updated edition process work? Do you say, hey, the world has changed, we need to refresh this? Do they come to you and say, hey, this is a good seller? We want, if it's, been adopted for a course, we want to give an updated version of it, or kind of, could you unpack that for us? Like how, do they knock on your door? Do you say, hey, Wiley, or hey, whoever, we need to update this? How does that work?
It's happened in both ways. The most recent edition with Wiley, I approached them and I said, listen, advertising is moving at the speed of light. We really need to update this book. And it had been, I think, they don't usually approach you in a less period of 3 years. 3 years is usually the magic number.
Okay.
Is that sales start to drop off and people buy used copies. So they have their whole profit reasoning.
Sure.
And as the author, and plus it depends on the discipline, so if it's a book about drawing, they're not going to update it that often unless they see sales starting to go flat or fall because people are buying used copies.
Gotcha.
But in my discipline in design and advertising, it really, tech just changes everything so quickly that you have to keep updating. There are legal issues, which your listeners might find interesting and comforting, that legally you have to change 25% of the book in order to get people to buy, or say, hey, listen, this is a new book. And once I start writing, I would say that my books change by 45% because I'm like, oh my gosh, no good, out.
Yeah, okay.
I just it's like I rewrite it practically. And so for me, 25% isn't enough.
That's an easy target to hit. So, gotcha.
But I really think that to be fair, it gives somebody more new content than that.
How do you, with that kind of thing, I mean, it's point taken. So 25% is one thing, 45% is, practically twice that, because I'm fairly good at math here, Robin. So how do you do that with simultaneous books and teaching and consulting and lecturing? I mean, and exercising and dancing. I mean, how do you parse your time to be able to, have, and to still produce quality? Because I know there's a lot of folks that produce, but it's the quality is not always consistently there. And for the familiarity that I have with you and your work, it is, spot on. You don't win these awards and these accolades and publishing contracts by, being mediocre. So what's your productivity process like with this?
I don't cook.
Oh, well, we share something else in common.
A lot of pizza.
All right, there's the secret, folks.
A lot of steamed vegetables. My husband's not thrilled that I don't cook, and I don't like his cooking. So
okay.
It saves both of us a lot of time. It really does. And I'm actually fast at writing. Writing is
good for you.
I love writing, and people think I'm crazy, but I write on an elliptical machine.
Oh my God, really? Oh my gosh.
So I do part of my writing, that's an hour a day on the elliptical. So I'm kind of doing two first because I don't have patience for the elliptical otherwise.
Oh, that's brilliant. Oh my gosh.
I mean, I could read on it, but for some reason I like writing on it, and my brain is like all the endorphins are flowing.
Yeah, so. You're very oxygenated. I'd be hypoxic actually, but that's.
Yeah. So I really, most people like at the gym or at hotel gyms look at me like I'm out of my mind.
Yes, it is. I would imagine it's a non-common sight there, Robin. So,
Yeah, it is an uncommon sight, but I get a lot done that way. And then I get up early, and I
yeah.
work. And again, it's non-negotiable, but I love it. I don't love the part of the books, and I don't know if you had to do this, but imagery, you have to get permission.
Oh, yeah,
You
yeah.
know that anybody, a quote over 100 words, you have to get permission. And
Mm-hmm.
any, like if I asked you to write an essay for my book, I'd have to get permission from you.
Right.
And acquiring images and acquiring essays and acquiring contributions, that's the part I don't like and takes a ton of time because people forget and you have to get it later
Yeah.
decided and they send it back blank or getting high res enough images
Right.
or getting graphic designers are very generous about allowing me to use their work. Advertising agencies, you have to jump through hoops because they're their clients
Right.
and the photographers and the talent.
Yeah, we had there was a book I co-wrote with, and my co-author just had to have this one image, and we had to buy it, and our publisher didn't reimburse us. They're like, take it out of your royalties, and it was sort of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So yeah, I know what you mean. One of the things too I hated, actually, I cut my teeth on this as as a graduate student, was that I got hired by one of my professors to do the index for a book that he was doing. And Robin, oh my gosh, that was like the most horrible, tedious. And this is, oh my gosh, dating myself here. This is probably 1982. So I didn't have Word. I don't even know if Word Perfect had been invented yet or whatever. But if it had, I couldn't afford it. But it was just sort of like this going through paper like where did this word show up? Oh, it showed up three other times. Oh my gosh, it was just torture. So I had one publisher who liked to torture me and said, hey, if you want an index, and you have to have an index in your book, and if you want to pay for the index, here's what it's going to cost, and if you don't want to pay for the index, then I guess you're going to do it. And I'm like, oh, don't do this to me. So
Oh yeah, no, I've never done an index, nor do I ever want to do it.
it's yeah, just to get that out of the contract. So, well, I also think maybe one of your creative disciplines around your productivity is another theory I have. So I want to check this out. One short story at lunch. Is that also one of your superpowers to being able to be so productive with your writing? Tell the audience what that's all about.
Yes, as you know, I mostly write nonfiction, and when I was in senior year of college or graduate school, I wrote what I thought was a screenplay,
Uh-huh.
and I really hadn't pursued fiction or screenwriting, and always concentrated on nonfiction. And my daughter was taking a summer course at Harvard with a renowned short story writer and instructor. And so when she would call home, I'd say, "What did you learn today?"
Uh-huh.
And she would tell me, and I would kept doing that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to learn how to write a short story by getting the information from my daughter, the instructions secondhand from my daughter. And I would take a break at lunchtime over the summer. And I thought, okay, at lunch, I'm going to try to write one short story.
Wow.
And that's how I learned how to do it. And then when she came home, I showed it to her and she said, no, not good.
Thanks, honey.
Thank you. She said, remember, Mom, in a short story, the character only wants one thing, and that's how you have to think about it. So I went
Oh,
back, which was a great note.
yeah.
She's actually a very good teacher.
Well, wonder why.
And I went back, and I now understand that, like an advertisement, the character has one want, and there's an obstacle, and the character gets what they want and overcomes the obstacle.
That's so perfectly fitting. Oh my gosh. Oh, I love that. I just love that. So, Well, Robin, you have been very generous with your time. I know you are on, speaking of, ellipticals, you're also on a treadmill with publicity tours and things. And Robin shared with me off mic before that she lectured yesterday, and we're just very thankful that her voice is held out for today and talking about the book at her university and things. So this has been just a wonderful conversation. Is there anything that I've missed that you would like to add before we wrap up, Robin?
I just think you're brilliant, Chris. I'm really in awe of this conversation and interview.
Oh.
How your listeners are so lucky, so fortunate to have this from you.
Oh, well, I think they're fortunate because of who my guest is, not so much for me, but that is very kind of you to say. Thank you. I would like to believe that. So,
I mean, I knew you were like super before I got on, but I mean, just speaking with you, you're brilliant.
Well, hey, it takes one to know one, my friend. So, thank you for being on, Robin. For listeners that want to know more about your work or get your books or take your classes or follow you or whatnot, what are some of the best ways to do so? And we'll put this all in the show notes.
Thank you. They can find me at robinlanda.com. That's my website. And as you said, I'm all over social media.
You are, sister.
I'm not on Be Real yet. I don't know if you are, but I'm pretty much everywhere else. LinkedIn is my favorite.
Okay.
They can connect with me there on my website. There's free downloads, so that's fun.
Great, awesome, yeah, and I have used that. I'm a customer too, so that's awesome. So, well, again, Robin, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time today. I look forward to the next books and all the different kinds of things that you're involved with. You are a treasure to so many people, your students and the world with the work that you do and your humanitarian efforts. And it's been a thrill to be able to spend this time with you.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Living a Life in Full is a production of Stout Media, a subsidiary of Gordian Knot, LLC. Assistant producer, Gracie Wong. Music, Dan O'Brien. Executive producer and host, Dr. Chris Stout. To learn more, stop by our website, A Life in Full, for show notes. And please recommend us to your friends and subscribe on your favorite platform. And as for the obligatory disclaimer, this podcast is for general information uses only and does not constitute the practice of psychology, medicine, nutrition, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical or psychological advice. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I take conflicts of interest seriously. For all of my disclosures as well as show notes, please see livingalifeinfull.org/podcast and my LinkedIn profile. Thanks, and until next time.